Hey everybody, welcome to vRealize Operations. What's new? My name is Matt Bradford, and I'm joined today with Brandon Gordon. We both work for VMware's Cloud Management Business Unit in technical marketing. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Just taking a quick look at the agenda, we're going to be just taking a quick look back at vRealize Operations 8.0 and 8.1. And a lot of the features that we're going to be highlighting in today's session are focused around these two releases. So we're just going to start off with just a quick look at what came in both of these two releases. Then we're going to talk about a new offering, which is vRealize Operations Cloud. We'll move on to talking about Kubernetes management, look at troubleshooting, what we can do with multiple clouds, so your on-premises cloud, public clouds, VMware Cloud on AWS. And then look at some of the integrations that we have with vRealize Automation, new vRealize Network Insight integrations, and some of the cool new stuff with vRealize Log Insight. And then finally, we'll wrap up looking at some of the cost management features that vRealize Operations can bring. Now, vRealize Operations is really focused around helping cloud operations. So these are systems administrators, VI admins, to be able to manage their clouds and to ensure that everything is operating as efficiently as possible. Make sure that your applications have plenty of resources and that you're serving your users properly, no matter where these are running. And so vRealize Operations is more than just looking at vSphere. As you can see on the slide here, we're looking at, obviously, your on-premises vSphere within your own data center or out in the edge somewhere, but also public cloud. So VMware Cloud on AWS, AWS proper, Azure, Google Cloud Platform. Any of your assets running out here, vRealize Operations is here to help you manage all of these assets all from within a single platform. Now, we've delivered a lot of great new features in vRealize Operations 8.0 and 8.1, and we'll just take a quick look at what was in 8.0, which was released in October of 2019. Now, we adopted common constructs used with vRealize Automation, things such as cloud accounts and cloud zones, to really try to normalize everything between the various pieces of your cloud management platform. From a capacity planning and management side, we introduced improved capacity planning for things like hyperconverged infrastructure. So not only being able to add hosts to a vSAN cluster, but also remove hosts and add and remove virtual machines. And then from a costing perspective, you can get a lot more granular with your cost drivers, because if you have data centers that are geographically separated, you might actually pay a different price for your hardware for site A than you would for site B. So with 8.0, we introduced, per data center cost drivers. And then if you're running Cloud Health to monitor your public cloud costs, we can start to pull some of that data into vRealize Operations for, again, that single platform for being able to manage both public and private clouds. 8.0 brought the cool new Troubleshooting Workbench, which, if you haven't seen this yet, we have a number of slides on this that we'll show you today. But the Troubleshooting Workbench is really all about digging through all the rich data in vRealize Operations to help you troubleshoot things like ESXi hosts, virtual machines, applications, and being able to adjust the scope of what it is that you're looking at, whether it's from the virtual machine to the vSphere cluster, or from an application to an ESXi host. It's a really powerful new feature that I'd really like you to take a look at, and I think you're going to be as excited about it as we are. And then from an application standpoint, Service Discovery is now native to vRealize Operations. So you just enable it within your vCenter connector, and it's going to go out and discover what services are running on your virtual machines. So we have a number of out-of-box services that we can discover, but you can also whitelist your own services. So a lot of extensibility here. You can also execute scripts and commands on virtual machines directly from vRealize Operations, and also you can look at the top number of processes. So say, look at the top 10 processes that are consuming CPU and memory. So if we're trying to troubleshoot a virtual machine that, all of a sudden we're seeing CPU hit 100% and it's starting to choke the applications, well, we can actually just run this top-end feature directly from vRealize Operations to see exactly what service or what application is consuming all of those resources. We also introduced a new management pack for Azure, so you can keep an eye on your virtual machines and services that are running out there. And then from a compliance standpoint, we've enhanced our compliance content. We've also added the ability to check compliance for virtual machines running in AWS and being able to import and export your own compliance standards. So if you're running multiple vRealize Operations instances, you can carbon copy your compliance standards between all of them. And from a platform standpoint, we introduce continuous availability. So being able to configure vRealize operations across fault domains. So if you lost an entire physical site, vRealize operations can continue to run in the other site. And then in 8.1, we've got full support for vSphere 7 with Kubernetes. And we have a couple of slides where we're going to talk about that. We've got support for Google Cloud Platform. There's support for virtual volumes, new integrations between vRealize Operations Cloud and vRealize Log Insight Cloud and Automation Cloud, integration with Slack, integration with vRealize Network Insight, the ability to monitor physical OSs, costing of vRealize automation projects and virtual machines through rate cards, plus a number of usability enhancements such as new summary pages, simplified alert creation workflow, improvements to alert notification, and better dashboard management. And of course, we've got to talk about vRealize Operations Cloud. So for those of you familiar with the vRealize suite, right, the latest version 2019 includes vRealize Automation 8.1, vRealize Operations 8.1, and vRealize Log Insight 8.1. We've also released vRealize Network Insight 5.2 recently. But VMware has, of course, been focused a lot on SaaS lately, so not only VMware Cloud on AWS, but also being able to offer our vRealize products as SaaS offerings. So, of course, vRealize Automation Cloud, vRealize Log Insight Cloud, Network Insight Cloud, right? We've had these solutions around for some time now, but we now have vRealize Operations Cloud available today. So if you want to use your cloud management tools to monitor your environment, but you don't really want to have to spend time upgrading and caring and feeding for those tools themselves, the vRealize Operations Cloud, Automation Cloud, Log Insight Cloud, Network Insight Cloud are all great options for you because they're fully managed by VMware. So you don't have to worry about things like upgrades and making sure that you have enough capacity for your tools, right? VMware is just going to take care of all of that for you. So if you are interested in this sort of offering, be sure to check out the vRealize Operations Cloud product page on your screen here. There is a place for you to sign up for a 30-day free trial, so we'll either grant you a free trial or give you access to a shared instance of vRealize Operations Cloud so that you can try it out for yourself. And just like our on-premises offerings, which all integrate very closely together, our cloud-based offerings do as well. So vRealize Operations Cloud integrates with vRealize Automation Cloud, vRealize Log Insight Cloud, and vRealize Network Insight Cloud. And as long as you're subscribed to each of these services, you don't have to worry about configuring the integration between them, right? It's all just handled for you. All right, I have no doubt that everybody here has heard of vSphere 7 with Kubernetes, right? This was the big announcement that VMware made a few months back, that vSphere 7 will ship with the ability to run Kubernetes on top of vSphere, right? Fully supported by VMware. And of course, in vRealize Operations 8.1, we're including full support for vSphere 7 with Kubernetes. What we're trying to accomplish with vSphere with Kubernetes is to simplify something that's complex, Kubernetes. So instead of requiring multiple teams that have limited visibility, vSphere with Kubernetes integrates the Kubernetes control plane with the hypervisor. So not only does this simplify the management of Kubernetes, it also allows Kubernetes to work with directly with things like Distributed Resource Scheduler, for example. Now, as a virtualization administrator, you would enable the supervisor cluster and carve out namespaces for your DevOps engineers. And they can run things like Tanzu Kubernetes clusters, virtual machines, and vSphere pods within that namespace. And then you can also limit the amount of CPU, memory, and storage that can be consumed by the namespace. So basically what's happening is a resource pool is created for that namespace. So this is yet another benefit to using vSphere with Kubernetes. Now in vRealize Operations 8.1, all of these constructs are natively available. So you'll be able to see all of your supervisor clusters, your namespaces, your vSphere pods, and your Tanzu Kubernetes clusters, all within vRealize Operations. And through the vCenter adapter, all of these objects are automatically detected. So there's really nothing for you to have to configure to be able to start using this. And all of these new constructs have their own summary pages, so we're giving you a lot of information about them. You'll get the benefits of the traditional infrastructure, like being able to do capacity planning and troubleshooting and monitoring the performance of these. So all of these all of this information is visible to these new objects. Plus, we're also going to map these constructs, these new objects, to the more traditional vSphere objects. So that mapping is automatically done. So you know where this namespace is running, what host, where this pod is running, and so forth. And on top of the summary pages, we also have some additional content, such as dashboards and reports, which we'll take a look at in just a second here. Because there's a lot of additional considerations to running this within your environment. So we want to make sure that you have a lot of very useful information right out of the box. And then on top of all this, we also, of course, have new alerts as well, so that you know when issues are occurring within your environment. So the Workload Management Inventory Dashboard gives us a nice summary of the entire Kubernetes cluster. And it also, again, maps these relationships back to your traditional vSphere components. So that way you can see really from end to end, from the pods all the way to the virtual infrastructure, just as you would with, say, traditional application monitoring. And then that way you can identify, what is supporting particular areas within that container space, as well as get detailed information about the various components that are supporting that, such as properties and metrics. We've also included 9 new reports for all of these new workload management constructs. So for the vSphere pods, supervisor clusters, Tanzu Kubernetes clusters, and namespaces. And these reports, again, are all around the concepts of configuration, inventory, and capacity of these objects. And there are also 18 new alerts for vSphere pods to give you insight into any sort of issues with performance, with your storage and compute, availability, capacity problems, anything that you really want to be aware of. And then if you want to dive deep into the rich world of Kubernetes, there's the vRealize Operations Management Pack for container monitoring. So this will allow you to monitor really any flavor of Kubernetes, whether it's Kubernetes on top of vSphere, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, or even OpenShift, doesn't really matter. And this could also be running in VMware Cloud on AWS, AWS proper, Azure, Google, doesn't really matter. This management pack just extends the ability of vRealize Operations to be able to monitor these environments. So now let's take a look at some of the new capabilities around troubleshooting that we've introduced recently. The Troubleshooting Workbench is an awesome new feature that we introduced in vRealize Operations 8.0, and this allows us to troubleshoot things from virtual machines, hosts, really any object within vRealize Operations. So what we do is we select the object that we want to troubleshoot, and then we can define the scope in 2 different ways. So we can set the time range that we're trying to troubleshoot. So by default, we're going to be looking at the last 6 hours. But we can also configure this for custom time ranges, or we can increase or decrease that time range. So if I'm coming in and taking a look at an issue that maybe occurred overnight, I can set a custom time range to really kind of hone into that time window. We can also set the scope based on the number of objects that we want to look at. So on your screen here, you can see we're troubleshooting this JD Win 10 virtual machine. And the scope is set, again, by default, it's going to look at one object above and one object below this virtual machine. So in this case, we can see the data store, but we can also see the host system. So again, one level below, one level above. Now, if I'm trying to troubleshoot something that maybe something at the cluster level could be impacting this, I can increase my scope. And now what we'll see is the host system, we'll see the vSphere cluster, we might see vSAN, and what this is going to do is bring some interesting information to our attention. So we're looking at things like events. When we're troubleshooting, one of the first questions we ask is, hey, what changed? Right? So we're going to show any sort of property changes, and then we're going to show any anomalous metrics, so metrics that have had changes during the time window that we're looking at. And all of these events, property changes, anomalous metrics are going to be coming from the selected object. So in this case, again, we've got the JD Win 10 virtual machine selected. So we'll see any sort of changes with that virtual machine, as well as the host system and the data store. So let's talk a little bit more about what the differences are between the events, property changes, and the anomalous metrics. So the events are going to show any alerts that were triggered for those objects, as well as any metrics that are behaving outside of their norm. vRealize Operations learns what's normal for each of your metrics for all objects that it's monitoring. And these are called dynamic thresholds. So if a particular metric lands outside of that threshold of what vRealize Operations knows to be normal for that metric, well, it's going to show up here under events. And property changes are somewhat self-explanatory, right? This is going to be any configuration changes that happen on any of the objects within the scope of what we're troubleshooting. So if somebody were to add more CPU or maybe even take away CPU from a virtual machine, then that's going to show up under property changes. And then the anomalous metrics are a little bit different from what we show in events. So anomalous metrics are going to show any metrics that have a drastic change within the time period of what we're, again, looking at here. So this may actually show different metrics from what you would see under events, because some of these changes may still be within those dynamic thresholds, but they're changes, and these are things that you should be aware of when you're trying to troubleshoot something. Another thing to point out is that we're going to rank the anomalous metrics. So the first metrics that we're going to show are the most recent metrics which have changes. One thing to call out here is that the Troubleshooting Workbench is going to show you the entire list of any sort of evidence or changes that have occurred across the, again, configured time range and the scope. But sometimes there's a common change happening on more than one object, and in most cases these are more of a consequence of something that happened rather than actually showing the root cause. For example, if one of the virtual machines on an already overcommitted host suddenly starts to demand more, say, CPU, many VMs on that host will actually start to face contention, right, and have performance problems. But all of a sudden, seeing CPU ready values for all of these other virtual machines is a consequence of that original change, right, that original virtual machine asking for more CPU. So one of the things that we introduced in vRealize Operations 8.1 is the ability to hide common evidence. So again, these all of those contention problems, that CPU ready that we're seeing on multiple objects on all of those virtual machines, well, we can hide those because, again, that's going to be a consequence and not the root cause. So this new feature allows us to reduce the noise and drill down to the root cause a lot faster. And speaking of cutting through the noise, we have a new alert ranking system where we can show the most important alerts to you. And alert importance is identified by vRealize Operations in a couple of different ways. So first of all, we want to know if this is an object that you're really interested in. Okay, is this a host or a virtual machine that you're visiting frequently within vRealize Operations? Are you looking at the summary page a lot? Are you looking at the metrics for this virtual machine a lot, right? If this is an important virtual machine to you or your organization, then yeah, you would be visiting that a lot more than a test dev virtual machine that really isn't that important to you. We also leverage AI to help separate the background noise of common alerts. So if this is an unusual alert, something that we don't see frequently, well then we're going to give that alert higher importance. And we're also taking into consideration things like the duration of the alert and how far spread this alert is. Is it just impacting a few virtual machines, or is this a much wider spread issue? So all of these things weigh into the importance of an alert. And then there's also the ability to correlate metrics. So if I see something of interest in vRealize Operations, I can simply tell it to correlate this against other metrics for the object that I'm looking at, or for any peer objects. So if I'm seeing something strange happening in maybe the networking of a virtual machine, I can say, all right, correlate this with peer virtual machines, with other virtual machines, and be able to identify, is this just a local issue or is this something more widespread that's impacting a lot of virtual machines? So this saves a whole lot of time of trying to click through and look at all the other metrics manually, right? We're just going to show you, these are the other metrics that also correlate with what we're seeing, that also show similar patterns to what you've identified in the selected metric. And of course, vRealize Operations doesn't just stop at the virtual machine level. We can go even deeper and get metrics from the operating system and from applications that are running on that. So we have things like service discovery, as well as full application monitoring using the Telegraph agent. So you can deploy the agent on your virtual machines directly from vRealize Operations, And this will give you deep analytics into 20 of the most common applications that customers monitor. And through the agent, you can actually run custom scripts to return values, so you can create basically your own metrics for a virtual machine. So if I wanted to, say, count the number of files in a particular folder, I could run a script that returns that number, and it will show up in vRealize Operations as a metric. Plus, you can do things like HTTP monitoring. So if I wanted to see, what value I get in return for a web request to a host, I could also do ICMP, TCP type of checks as well through the use of the Telegraph agent. Now I'm going to turn things over to Brandon to talk about multi-cloud monitoring with vRealize Operations.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Now, like Matt said, I want to talk a little bit about multi-cloud monitoring. So what this means from a vRealize Operations perspective is all of the different clouds that we now support for monitoring. So out of the box, we have support for VMware Cloud on AWS, native AWS, and Azure. And then we also have a management pack available now for Google Cloud. So you're able to add all of these clouds in addition to your on-prem vSphere environment into vRealize Operations. So you can see now we've got support for all of the big cloud providers. So let me dive into some of these a little bit more. So the first one here is VMware Cloud on AWS. This was added as a native cloud account in 8.1. So what this means is now when you go to add your cloud account, you just select VMC. You enter your CSP token that you get from the Cloud Services portal. Once you do that, the system will automatically discover all of the SCDCs that you have in your environment, and it kind of walks you through the process of setting up all of the monitoring for those. So what this actually includes is vCenter, vSAN, NSXT, and also a collection of the bills. So there's a lot of stuff you can get from this native support now, and the nice part is, like I said, it's all part of this one wizard. So in addition to that, we have some new VMC specific dashboards available. So these cover various use cases for your monitoring environment. So we have things like looking at the performance of your management components in your VMC environment, like looking at the performance of vCenter, your NSX controllers, your edges, etc. So it's a dedicated dashboard just to look at the management components. We have things that look at the capacity of your SCDCs. So if you have multiple SCDCs, you can see all of the capacity of just your VMC environments in this capacity dashboard. And then we have this top-end dashboard that helps you find kind of the outliers, the ones that consume the most resources, like the highest network utilization or the highest latency, the highest CPU, etc. So the next piece I mentioned previously was talking about the cost. So what this does is this actually connects into the CSV portal and actually downloads the bills that you get. So you're able to track the cost of the VMC environment using this integration. So you can see the screenshot here showing this dashboard. So this is actually showing the bills for this particular environment. This covers things like your outstanding expenses. So this is what basically what you have not been billed for yet so far for what you use this month. You've got the total expense, and then you've got it broken down into commit and on demand. So it depends on how you pay for your infrastructure. But you'll be able to see, and at the bottom you see your purchase history. So these are all your subscriptions and your on-demand charges. So this would include things like egress charges as well. So the next part here is shifting to native AWS. So this gives you the ability to monitor your AWS resources themselves. So there's a rather extensive list of services that are supported. We have a lot of alerts and dashboards. I mean, there's just so much content here for AWS. It's hard to really give you a scale of all of it in just one little slide here. But there's a lot of stuff that is supported. So definitely encourage you to check that out. One of the cool ones there is that cloud formation stack. So you can see how everything is related based on your cloud formation. the next one here is talking about Azure. So this was added in 8.0, and this gives you the ability to monitor your Azure environment. So it supports the big resources there, VMs, resource groups, bunch of different types of SQL databases, load balancers, and more. So this one, very similar to the AWS one, gives you the ability to monitor your AWS environment. And again, this has several out-of-the-box dashboards and alerts to help monitor your Azure environment as well. And then the last one here is Google Cloud. So this Google Cloud support was added in 8.1. And this now, this is a management pack that you have to download from the Sample Exchange or Solutions Exchange site. This one, you install it and configure it to connect to your Google Cloud, and it supports the compute engine, storage buckets, VPN, BigQuery, and Kubernetes. So a lot of great stuff there coming from Google Cloud as well. And then, just like the other ones, there's dashboards and alerts built into the system to help monitor all this. So you can set all these up and monitor all these clouds from your single VROps instance. So one of the things that likely will come up if you are doing monitoring of public clouds is looking at it from a cost perspective. So some customers may already have subscribed to Cloud Health. If you do have Cloud Health, you can use that management pack to collect the bills or the cost data from Cloud Health and present the costs into vRealize Operations. So this covers both, or it covers all of AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. So it supports all three of the major clouds there. And you get support for all your services, your regions, accounts, etc., across all three of those clouds. So the support for Google Cloud was just added in the 8.1 release, and the 8.0 release had support for AWS and Azure. So the Google Cloud support is the new feature. And the other new feature in the Cloud Health Management Pack is support for perspectives. So if you do use Cloud Health, you probably already know the power of perspectives. This gives you the way of like categorizing your costs and allocating them to various constructs that make sense in your environment. Could be business units, could be owners, could be whatever. However you like to divide up your costs. And the idea now is you can actually import these perspectives into vRealize Operations, so you can actually create cost reports based on those perspectives as well. So not only are you looking at the high-level data for your public cloud spend, you can also get down into much more details with these perspectives. So continuing on, I want to talk a little bit about some of these integrations. So we have quite a few really great integrations between our products. So just to talk through a few of these here. So the first one is the integration with vRealize Automation. So what the main thing here that I think is really important to understand is now we have these shared constructs between the two products. So the terminology that we're using in vRealize Operations is the same as what we use in vRealize Automation, and you'll see that back and forth as we go along. So things like Cloud Account, which I mentioned earlier when I was talking about adding VMC or AWS and Azure, we now call those Cloud Accounts. So that's your connection to your various clouds. That's what it was called in vRealize Automation, and it's called the same now in vRealize Operations. You have other things like cloud zones. So you define a cloud zone in vRealize Automation, and that cloud zone then comes into vRealize Operations. It looks exactly the same as it does in vRealize Automation. This gives support for workload optimization. So this is after you get your initial deployment placement, and then after it's deployed, you get your day 2 optimization of the workloads as well. A couple other things is we have cost that you can see now in vRealize Automation. So you can see when you deploy virtual machines, you see how much those cost. So we have a bunch of dashboards that are built in that show you a lot of great info about your VRA deployment. So talk a little bit about the part of the price piece. So this is talking about the integration between vRealize Operations and vRealize Automation to show the prices for your virtual machines. So what you see on the left here is a dashboard that's built into vRealize Operations that shows the projects and deployments, and you can see the prices for those and how the price changes over time. And then on the right, you see vRealize Automation. This is what you see now in 8.1, where you can see the price of the virtual machine over time, how much it costs for that particular deployment. You can also see it at the project level as well. And then before you actually go and deploy a blueprint, you can get the estimated price, so that when your customers come in or your users come in to request a new blueprint, they will actually see how much the VM would potentially cost before they deploy it, so they can make a decision on whether they want to deploy it or not. And then also in 8.1, there was ability added to do approvals based on this price estimate. So you can say, if the VM exceeds a certain price, it requires approval, or if it's less than this, automatically approve it. So it gives you some flexibility in there for those approvals. So speaking of pricing, the integration actually gives you the ability to say how you want to price the virtual machines. So you have an option of making the price of the virtual machines be based on the cost of the virtual machine. Or you can make them based on rate cards. So you say, you define your own values. So that's one thing that's good. That's really important to understand the difference between cost and price. So cost is how much it actually costs you to run the virtual machine, and price is how much you want to charge for the virtual machines. So you can base the price on cost if you want to, or you can define your own way of coming up with the price. So that's an important distinction. You can see both price and cost on the vRealize Operations side. On the vRealize Automation side, you only see the price. So the user, when they log in, they see the price. That's all they know about. They don't know about the cost. So the important part here is you can define these pricing cards. So those pricing cards were added in 8.1. And you can apply these pricing cards either to a project or a cloud zone. So it's important to figure out which way you want to do it before you actually do go in and start defining these pricing cards, because you need to make the choice of which one you want to do. And then options you have on defining the price cards is whether you want to base the price on cost, or if you want to do it based on rate. So the rate is how many vCPUs are allocated, how much memory is allocated, or how much storage is allocated to the virtual machine. And then other things you can do are add prices based on the guest OS, based on whether the VM has specific vCR tags, based on custom properties that you apply in the deployment itself. And you have the ability to do both one-time and recurring costs. So these can be like a setup fee or ongoing maintenance fee, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff you can add in here to come up with a price for the virtual machines. So I definitely encourage you to check those out, especially if you use both products. So the next one here I wanted to talk about is with vRealize Network Insight. And this is now a new management pack that has been released for 8.1. And what this does is this gives you a way of linking the two products together. And what you'll see, the first part you see here is actually bringing in the alerts from VRNI. So these are either the system-defined alerts or user-defined alerts. It'll automatically bring both of those in. And you'll see for the ones that are system-defined, those will automatically get mapped to the appropriate NSX object or virtual machine or whatever. They get mapped to the appropriate object in vRealize Operations. And the user-defined alerts will get mapped to an object called VRNI others. So you'll be able to see all of those on that object. So really, really cool integration. It brings a lot of power in for you to do things like the troubleshooting workbench to diagnose potential problems. You can go from vRealize Operations on into Network Insight. So this part here is pretty cool. So like I was just mentioning, actually doing the transition from vRealize operations into Network Insight, you have this launch in context. So this will automatically show up in the actions dropdown for objects that are shared between the two products. So these are things like virtual machines, you have NSX edges, NSX controllers, NSX managers. Also the NSXT objects are supported, hosts, clusters, etc. So you just have the little action drop down and it'll automatically launch you straight into Network Insight. So it has the whole query populated already. So really, really great for jumping in between the products. So here's the callouts for it. So the next piece here is talking about our integration with Log Insight. So this is a really, really cool addition. So this actually gives you the ability to see the number of events from vRealize Log Insight inside vRealize Operations as a metric. So you can track things like, are the number of errors that you're seeing over time trending up or down? Is it anomalous? You can use that for like metric correlation. So like you can do a correlation based on the number of errors, and maybe you can find a correlation with CPU utilization or different things like that. So really, really cool feature is actually being able to see these. So you get error count, warning count, and the total number of logs. So three great metrics you definitely want to check out. So next, I've got a few slides here on cost management. So these are some improvements for cost in vRealize operations. So remember, I talked about price previously. Now I'm talking about cost. So new in 8.0, we have this new showback dashboard that was added. So this gives you the ability to actually show how much it costs for the virtual machines based on various constructs in vRealize operations. So these can be custom groups, applications, cloud zones, projects, etc. And you can see how much it costs for all the virtual machines in that group. You can see which VMs are the most expensive, which ones have the most potential savings, etc. And then of course you can export these to give to your users. And then 8.1, we added another new dashboard for base rate analysis. So this is looking at the efficiency of your environment based on the base rate. That's the cost of per gigahertz of CPU, per gigabyte of RAM, and gigabyte of disk space, as well as new reports for cluster, data storage, server, and virtual machine costs. The virtual machine cost report is another one you can do for showback. You pick the objects you want to run the report on and run the VM cost report, and that will give you the showback report for that particular group of virtual machines. The next one here I want to talk about is cost driver improvements. So these are the new improvements that came in 8.0. So one of the biggest improvements there was the ability to specify cost per data center. So previous versions, you just entered one cost that was enterprise-wide. Now you can actually go in and say, my facilities cost different for my Europe data center versus my data center that's in the US versus the data center down in South America. So you can go in and actually pick your data centers and say which costs, what the costs are for this particular data center. So this is supported on storage, license, maintenance, labor, network, and facilities. All of those can do a data center level cost now. We have also the ability to show depreciation as metrics and properties. So if you need to create reports or dashboards showing the cost of your hosts, as well as the depreciation, etc., you can do that now as of 8.0. And then new in 8.1 is support for a few additional cost drivers. So these give you the option of adding additional costs based on the cluster and the data center. So the reason why adding additional costs on the cluster would be useful is, say you have a cluster dedicated to a particular application, say maybe like a database cluster or something like that. You can actually say, okay, here's my license cost for the cluster, and you apply it to that particular cluster, and the costs get distributed across all the hosts and the virtual machines within that environment. So it gives you a lot more flexibility when you have unique circumstances like that. But you still have support for VM level, additional costs, host, and vCenter. Those are still supported. The other new option here is for the default server batch. So what this gives you the ability to do is this the yellow section down there on the bottom where it says default server batch. This means all new servers of that particular make and model that get discovered automatically get the cost that you specify in that default batch. So you enter the purchase date, the purchase cost, own or lease, and then the compute percentage. And then that will automatically get applied to any new servers. So if you have a deal that you've made with your server vendor, you can go through and enter that here and automatically gets the right cost. Thank you for joining this session on what's new with vRealize Operations. Definitely encourage you to upgrade if you have not already. And if you're not currently a customer, you can always check out an eval version or sign up for vRealize Operations Cloud. Thank you so much and have a great day.